Welcome, scientists. I'm Jim Kikalius. If you were not here last week, I am the head of the School of Physics and Astronomy. And on behalf of the school and the Minnesota Institute for Astrophysics, I want to welcome you to another talk in our summer of Astounding Astrophysics. And let's see. Yes. And today's talk will be by Professor Lucy Fortson from the school and also from the Minnesota Institute for Astrophysics, MIFA. We see here all the support from the federal government and from private companies that made this all possible. Let me just introduce Lucy. She received her PhD at UCLA back in 1991, working at CERN out at in Geneva, Switzerland, doing high-energy particle physics. She then started working at Veritas, and I have to look this up to make sure I get it right. Veritas stands for the Very Energetic Radiation Imaging Telescope Array Systems. I think they came up with the acronym first and then tried to find out, found words that would fit it. Yes, exactly. But what that is a ground-based series of telescopes that look at gamma rays coming from outer space and from astrophysical phenomena, gamma ray astronomy. She worked as a research scientist at the Chicago Adler Planetarium at the University of Chicago. In 2010, she came to the University of Minnesota, where she's been ever since. In addition to her work in gamma ray astrophysics, she is renowned for her being the co-founder of the Zooniverse project, one of the largest projects in the citizen science enterprise. Her efforts on the Zooniverse have been recognized by the American Physical Society, which awarded her the Dwight Nicholson Medal for outreach efforts. She was made a fellow of the American Physical Society the following year for her work in gamma ray astrophysics and for the Zooniverse project. And in 2020, the University of Minnesota gave her the George W. Taylor Award for Distinguished Service for these efforts. So with that, I want to welcome Professor Fortson and thank you all again for coming back. And take it away.
Can everybody, yes, hopefully everybody can hear me. Great. Thank you, Jim. Thanks very much. Yes, I appreciate it. And it's going to be a hard act to follow for those of you who were here last week. I don't have as big of a fan base yet as Jim, but we're going to work on that. So so I am not going to say anything at all about gamma ray astrophysics. You'll have to come back some other summer when we do this again, and I'll do that. But what I am going to talk to you about is the Zooniverse project and why we need your help as citizen scientists to plow through all of the data that we have coming in. And so that is where we're going to start. So we have a lot of instruments around the world, not just telescopes, satellites. We have medical instruments. Of course, we have our cell phones, all sorts of instruments taking huge amounts of data and not just currently taking data, but of course we have all sorts of data from the past in these, is that going to work? Sort of, that's not very great, but okay. So we have all of human history that we can digitize and extract information from. So this is what we call the data deluge, or big data. So over time, we've got an explosion in the amount of information that we're getting from all of these sensors and data. And that is true in terms of the volume of data, the variety or complexity of the data, the velocity, how fast the data is coming in, And in particular these days, veracity of the data. We need some way of being able to understand whether the data that we're looking at is really what it is, or was meant to be. So the biggest question then is, how are we able to analyze all these data? Well, machines should be able to do that, right? Oh, we hear a lot of stuff about artificial intelligence and whatnot, but machine learning, computers, they should be able to analyze all these data. Well, obviously, I have a question mark there. So the answer is not really. We have what is this? A tiger. You can tell that even though it's trying to hide, right? Okay, so can computers spot it just as fast as this young man here? No. So human brains are evolutionarily wired. The ones that didn't spot the tiger got okay, so over millions and millions and millions of years, we've got a pretty good system up here for identifying complex images. Okay, we can see a tiger and hopefully run away from it. Okay, so humans are great at analyzing complex images. And furthermore, all that hype you're hearing about artificial intelligence, at the root of it all is a lot of human eyes that have trained the models that we're hearing about. I just have to say that all the stuff we hear about artificial intelligence, all the amazing images that we see, et cetera, all the things that we can see that it can do is based on information from humans. Okay, that's just a little bit of a sleight of hand, everybody, says out there, okay? So the machines are only as good as we make them. Okay, so that sort of sets us up to say throughout this talk, effectively the theme of this talk is we need to figure out a system that can combine both the strengths of the humans and the strengths of the machines. Because don't get me wrong, it's great when you've got a trained algorithm. It can move through stuff very, very quickly. Right? But as we'll see, we need the human ability to pay attention to weird things and complex images. All right, so this all starts, the sort of story I'm going to tell you starts with a seemingly simple question. And that is this question of, is there any pattern to the shapes of galaxies? So we have a bunch of galaxies up here. This is what is known as Hubble's tuning fork. The same Hubble that the Hubble Space Telescope is named after, Edwin Hubble, in the 1920s was the first scientist to really look at galaxies and try to make and understand what galaxies were, and trying to make some order, because humans like to make order to things. We like to classify things. And so he lined up the galaxies and sees these sort of so-called ellipticals over on this side and spirals over on this side. And basically, it turns out there's roughly 2 types of galaxies. Right? And so we can get into the details of it, but that's the basic story. So we have ellipticals and we have spirals. And we have these pesky little irregular galaxies, which we don't really actually know how to classify. And that will become part of the story much later. All right, but before we dive too much into the shapes or morphology of galaxies, let's ask an even simpler question. What is a galaxy? Oh, when the sun is about to set and the night grows darker and darker, what can you see up in the,
Stars.
Stars, okay. Yeah, what else? Planet. Oh my God, these guys are good. Okay. They're not plants here. What else?
The moon.
And the moon. Is that a planet? No, I'm not going to go there. Anybody else? What else can we see? Galaxies. Anything else?
The rest of the Milky Way is clear.
Bingo. Also not a plant. But yes, so all of those things. You can see all of those things. You can see all the stars up here. In this case, we can see the band that is our Milky Way galaxy. It's a band of light across because we're inside. Happens to be a spiral galaxy, so it's very flat. It's as if we're sitting inside a blueberry pancake. The blueberries are the stars. And if we're sitting inside a blueberry pancake and we're looking out along the edge of the pancake, what do you see? You see all of the pancake batter, all this stuff here, okay? So think about that. Milky Way galaxy is like a pancake. We're sitting inside the pancake on a blueberry. We're looking out and we see this band of blueberry/stars. Okay? So that is a galaxy. That is our galaxy. Okay? But there are many other galaxies. If you're able to take other kinds of measurements, you can actually see many different kinds of galaxies. But before we go there, let's figure out where a galaxy is in relationship to other things in the universe. Okay, so we already talked about, we've got our sun, which is a star. So our Earth and all the other planets rotate around, orbit around the sun, which makes our solar system. Our star is part of a nearby cluster of stars, which then are part of a spiral arm, the Orion arm, in the Milky Way galaxy. And we happen to be in the suburbs of the Milky Way galaxy. And then the Milky Way galaxy is just one of many, several dozen galaxies in what we call our local group of galaxies. And our local group of galaxies is a small group within a much larger cluster of galaxies. And then there are many clusters of galaxies which combine together to make the large-scale structure of the universe. Anybody want to point out something wrong with this image?
There's no galaxies.
There is a galaxy. There's lots of galaxies. But if I'm saying that's the Milky Way galaxy, and I got a picture of it, is that possible? No. We have not invented space travel to the point where we can get out of our own galaxy to look back and take a picture of it, okay? So this is clearly an artist's impression, okay? But this also helps us understand distances. So anybody want to take a guess as to how long it takes light to travel from your phone to your face when you're looking at your phone? Definitely under a second.
About 5 nanoseconds.
Oh my goodness. What do you feed these kids?
I actually listened from my phone. 1 second.
1 nanosecond. You don't get to answer this question. Anybody here know what a nanosecond is? You don't get to answer that. Way back there. It's a billionth of a second, okay? So if you've got your phone out, your phone could have destroyed itself a billionth of a second ago, and you wouldn't know it. I mean, billionth of a second is pretty short, so you probably would know it pretty quickly, obviously. But anyways, the point is, it takes time for light to travel. Light has a finite travel time, right? So our solar system is pretty big. So it takes light about 8 minutes to travel from the sun to the Earth. So if our sun happened to explode, we wouldn't know about it for 8 minutes. Okay. Oops, sorry. we can use the same phenomenon, the fact that light travels at a finite speed, and the further things are away from us, of course, the longer it takes for light to get to us. Okay, so that's a way for us to measure distance. So instead of minutes that it would take light to travel, we talk about light years. So the number of years it takes for light to get to us from the nearby stars is about 30 light years. The spiral arm, that is our home arm, the Orion, it's about 1,000 light years, okay? Our galaxy itself is about 100,000 light years across. So it takes 100,000 years for light to go from one side of the galaxy to the other side of the galaxy. A lot can happen in 100,000 years, okay? All right, so then all of these things here, hundreds of millions of years to span that distance, okay? So the universe is indeed vast. And the information that we get from the different parts of the universe, well, further back we look, the younger objects are, we get the light from things when they were young. We'd have to wait a very long time, hundreds of millions of years, for us to see things evolve. Okay, so effectively light is like a time machine. When we look back into the universe, we see things as they were. So keep that in mind. Okay, so we started this part with what is a galaxy? Okay, well, galaxies are where stars are born, live, and die. Stars actually have a life cycle. In the early universe, we only had hydrogen and helium, two basic elements. And that's what the Big Bang gave us, effectively. Hydrogen and helium. Stars fuse hydrogen and helium, making heavier elements, things we care about, like carbon, make up our body, the iron in our blood, the oxygen that we breathe, all comes from stars. And that is the initial picture was the picture of cheetah made of galaxies. And so it said in the bottom, we are star stuff. We are star stuff. We would not be here without the stars having been born, fusing hydrogen into helium and then helium into other heavier elements. When stars die, well, they die because they run out of fuel, just like anything. They run out of fuel, and all those elements that we care about get returned back to the galaxy. So the galaxy is like a recycling plant. And it just turns over and over and over again. The elements contract into the dust and gas that make up these places where stars are formed. So a new star can be born, it lives out its life, and then it dies, and then that star explodes out and seeds the galaxy with new, heavier elements. So there's a life cycle to stars, and it's really important for us because without that, we would not be here because we wouldn't have any carbon to build our bodies with. Okay, so a galaxy then is a collection of billions of stars. And these stars go through their life cycles. Young stars, it turns out, are hotter and bluer. Old stars are cooler and redder. So when we look at this video, all the bluish regions are young star clusters, which have blown away all the gas and dust that made them to begin with. These blue clusters of stars is a telltale sign of active star formation in a galaxy. Okay, so we can go back to our morphology or shape diagram and think, not only does it split into two types of shapes, but maybe there's another pattern here. Anybody see another pattern? Yeah, go ahead. Right, and so actually, weirdly enough, Hubble Edwin Hubble in the 1920s, thought the diagram went this way. Astronomers, I'm a physicist by training, so I get to diss the astronomers. Astronomers still call these things early type galaxies. Okay. It's hard for astronomers to give up names, but you're absolutely right. So it's more the bluer galaxies are on this side, the spirals, whereas the ellipticals are what we call red and dead. There's no star formation to speak of going on in them. Okay. So that's great, except for when we look at an image like this, and this happens to be another thing named after Hubble. The Hubble Space Telescope took this so-called Hubble Deep Field. This is about 250 hours of data sitting and looking at one tiny little place on the sky. It's about, if you were to hold your pinky finger up, it's about the same size as your pinky finger. Well, I have small hands, but your pinky finger nail, staring at a spot on the sky that big. Practically every single object in this image is a galaxy. There are only a very few stars. This is a star. You can tell by the diffraction spikes here. That's another one there. Almost everything else is a galaxy. So we just saw that spirals are supposed to be blue and full of life and stars being born. What about this guy right here? What's up with that? So clearly things are a little bit more complicated than Edwin Hubble thought in the beginning. It gets even more complicated when you realize that, right, so galaxies are evolving, as I said before. They're dynamic. It takes time for them. One of the biggest open questions in astronomy is, how do galaxies evolve? So this starts us off at the Big Bang. This is where the hydrogen and the helium was formed at the beginning of the universe. The first stars are formed about 200 million years after the Big Bang. And then the first galaxies appear, and the most of the galaxy development occurs about 1 billion years after the Big Bang. The peak of star formation in galaxies is about 3 billion years after the Big Bang. Clusters of galaxies are forming. They're still forming now, as it turns out. And here we are now with the Hubble peering into the sort of core sample of the universe. Remember, I said it takes time for light to travel. So as Hubble is peering at these galaxies, this one spot on the sky, it's seeing further and further and further and further back into time. But it can only see with a certain resolution. It can only see the details of galaxies out to about, this period of galaxy development. It's very hard to detect these early galaxies. And that's going to be an important part of our story. However, my lecture is not about galaxy evolution. It's about machine learning, weirdly enough, okay? But if you hang in there and come all the way through all of these lectures, you're going to hear Dr. Scarlata at the very end talk about galaxy evolution. She'll go into a lot more detail about galaxy evolution. Okay, so hold all this thought, come back in a couple of weeks and hear how we know much more about galaxy evolution because of all the amazing new instruments that have come online only in the last few years. Okay, so where does that leave us? So we're going to go back to this idea of big data. And we're going to use astronomy as an example of this flood of data. In the 1950s, we had the first sky survey published. 937 pairs of photographic plates taken. There were about 1,000 bright galaxies in that. Okay, in the 1980s, they redid the survey, updated it with different technology. There's about 30,000 bright galaxies that one can see in those plates. certainly one expert can go through and visually classify, figure out the shape, decide whether it's a spiral or an elliptical, and make a note of that in a catalog. All right. And then I just want to say next week, the same telescope, the Palomar telescope out in California, still doing really active research. And you'll hear from Dr. Coughlin next week about some of the amazing discoveries he's been making with that same telescope. Okay, so we moved on from plates, and we now actually have a digital camera, or in the 2000s, the Sloan Digital Sky Survey in New Mexico, boasted this amazing CCD camera with 5 color filters. We're not going to talk about what spectroscopy is, but it's really important. It had spectroscopic data, and it had about 1 million galaxies, bright galaxies. One expert, really, that takes too long for one expert. In fact, the experts tend to say to the graduate students, okay, you classified those. And the graduate students, in fact, this literally happened as part of the Galaxy Zoo story, which I'll say in a second. One of the graduate students stopped at 50,000 galaxies and said, no, not doing it anymore. We need computers to process all that. Great. Okay, so this is what the Sloan Digital Sky Survey gave us. It gave us the first 3D map of the heavens, right? So we can fly through. This is great on a planetarium dome, right? You can fly through. These are exact locations. This isn't just a simulation. These are exact locations with the exact galaxy at that location displayed. So that's pretty cool. But what else did it give us? Well, it gave us Galaxy Zoo, which is the beginning of the Zooniverse story. Right, so early machine algorithms, those computers that I said we need computers to analyze all the data. Guess what those smart computers did? Well, actually the humans that programmed the computers. They're like, yeah, well, we know that spirals are blue and ellipticals are red. So it's easy to program a computer to tell what color something is. So we just program a computer to say what the morphology or shape is based on the color. Works for about 80% of the galaxies. That's awesome. When you have 1 million galaxies, 800,000 galaxy classifications, pretty good. Except for what if you want to study blue ellipticals or red spirals? Yeah, so this graduate student I told you about, Kevin Schwinsky, was the one who had this question. Are there blue ellipticals and how many? And do I really have to go through 1 million galaxies to count all the blue ellipticals? After 50,000, he said no. Okay, so we can't have normal computers do it. So we need a special kind of computer. Us. Okay, it can't just be one of us, right? Kevin Schwinsky said no. So it has to be as many of us as we can get. All right, so this is this term called crowdsourcing. Question. How does Kevin feel? That is such an interesting question. I don't know. How does a friend of yours feel when you talk about them? I don't know. Like, yeah. He's probably okay. He probably doesn't even know what's happening. But yeah. Kevin got his PhD and published many, many papers and is now, guess what, working in the field of machine learning and artificial intelligence. So, okay, so in order to help Kevin, dear Kevin, who's listening, I'm sure, somewhere, they built the Galaxy Zoo platform. So this is Galaxy Zoo. Recruited large numbers of people. Actually, we thought it was going to be like maybe 20,000 people would respond to the sort of, blog posts and whatever, but it turned out there were, maybe several hundred, 250,000 people showed up, which was pretty impressive. And, 150,000. So 40 million classifications were done sort of continuously around the clock. And the simple question that was being asked was, is it elliptical or is it spiral? Great. So since 2008, there's been 73 papers just from the Galaxy Zoo team alone on the information that has been obtained just by visually classifying. That is why we still need humans. Okay, great. It worked for Galaxies in the Sloan Digital Sky Survey. Maybe that was a fluke, okay? Maybe there were just 250,000 people out there who loved Galaxies and that was all, right? So the big question is there cognitive surplus? Is the general population interested in doing something like this? Well, we spend collectively 128 years every hour playing Candy Crush and Monopoly Go. There's definite cognitive surplus. Wouldn't you rather be classifying galaxies? But here was the kicker. When we went from Galaxy Zoo to the Zooniverse, it wasn't just we were aware that there was this cognitive surplus out there. We did a survey and we found that the people who had participated on Galaxy Zoo, the main reason why they did it is they wanted to contribute to research. Something meaningful, not just Candy Crush, okay? They wanted something meaningful. So we built the Candy Crush alternative. We keep hoping it'll explode as much as, but we have about 3 million people. That's not bad for science, okay? So it's more fans than maybe you have, I don't know. Okay, so 3 million volunteers worldwide, nearly 1 billion classifications by now, about 780 full-time equivalent. Those of you who are in management positions and know what a full-time equivalent job is, that's a lot, okay? A volunteer effort, okay? 1.6 million hours annually, 525 projects since Galaxy Zoo. We launch about 40 per year. And here's the coin of the realm in academia. This is not, quote, just outreach. This is science that is being done by the general population. People such as yourselves contributing to research. In partnership, yes, with research teams, but as we'll see in a minute, without you guys, many discoveries would have been left on the floor. So how does this all work? I have our penguin. If you like penguins, we've got a project for you, but it's a marking task. We're tracking the effects of global warming on penguin populations. We have another marking task. You can discover your very own planet. I'm expecting you to do this project. You can discover. I am not joking. We have an 8-year-old. It was featured on CNN, an 8-year-old and his dad is one of the discoverers of an extrasolar planet. Okay, so there's your challenge. How old are you? 6, 7. Oh, okay, you would be the youngest. You did it. Biomedicine. We need a lot of help with complex data in biomedicine, so we get to draw around the cell nucleus, and that helps train machine algorithms to help study the structure of the nucleus under viral loads and things like that. And then we have what we call our survey tasks, studying migration and behavior patterns of a range of species in the Serengeti. Camera traps, they're called. Instead of a radio collar, which in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s was used. You would go out and you'd put on one poor lion a radio collar and track only that one lion. Here we have camera traps, cameras that are set out. Some of you may know these as sort of the hunting camera, trail cams. It's the same thing. They're set out in the Serengeti, and we can track the migration patterns of all the animals that pass by. Annotation, as I said at the beginning, all of human history. So all of these records that we host here at the University of Minnesota, all across the world, they can be transcribed and digitized so that we can actually plumb the depths of the information that's there. All right, so the key thing here is that it takes multiple independent classifiers. Again, we said early on, it's not just one person, not even one expert. The point is that you average together the votes of each person who's contributing. A lot of times when somebody is on the platform, they pick a project, they ask, well, what if I'm wrong? Doesn't matter. You can be wrong. It's okay. In fact, that wrongness actually tells us some interesting things, not just about you, but about the data itself. Okay. So independent classifiers, multiple independent classifiers, and we come up with a consensus answer. So we have an input image, goes to all the brains out there, get a consensus answer. And we can do fancy stuff. We can watch your skill over time and do fancy things with that. But that's a whole other talk. We're not going to do that. Okay, so here's the thing. Galaxy Zoo was great. It solved what we call the intermediate big data issue. Remember, there are 1 million galaxies in the Sloan Digital Sky Survey. Okay? That was here, 20 terabytes of data in 10 years, 1 million galaxies. Okay, we're just now having the James Webb Space Telescope and the European version of it, the Euclid Space Telescope. But we've got this massive, massive thing that's going to hit us, like literally just hit us, called the Vera Rubin Observatory. 15 terabytes of data in one night. It's taking a movie of the sky, okay? All right, 20 billion galaxies. Oh, God, okay, so, okay. Yes, we need to combine the strengths of humans and machines again. Okay, so, and it's not just astronomy. We had our Snapshot Serengeti launched in 2012. I got tired of clipping out all the different projects that do the same thing, and I stopped in 2021. But the trend just keeps going, okay? So, camera trap data, these are two big, and the biomed, oh yeah, and the digital humanities, oh, it's all huge. The data, we're just drowning in data. So we need to deploy some kind of artificial intelligence to help us. Okay, there lies danger. To be really careful. But I think I'm gonna skip over a certain amount of this. We can come back and ask questions if you want. But bottom line, people know how to train machines, and this thing called a neural network, a convolutional neural network. A convolutional neural network is the backbone of most of what people call machine learning. Machine learning is a part of AI. AI is much bigger. Well, it's a fancier name in certain ways for machine learning. The key thing is that machines need lots of data to train them effectively. We learned this when Galaxy Zoo put out a bunch of images to what's called a Kaggle competition. Money is given to people who can program. It doesn't matter who you are. You can be a member of the public. Typically, it's people from computer science departments. There's a set of data, and they train an algorithm to the objective that you set. when you give this set of data. We were hoping that they would tell us something interesting about galaxy evolution, the algorithm that they ended up developing. But the person who won actually won because he sliced up the data so that instead of a certain amount of images, he had 8 times the number of images and ended up creating an algorithm that copied all the images that we had given as a benchmark. So machines require large sets of images to train them correctly. Turns out you can use cats and dogs to train an algorithm that looks for galaxies. It's because of the way the machine works. Pixel by pixel by pixel. At the pixel level, it doesn't matter if it's a dog or a cat or a galaxy. So again, you can ask questions later about this, but just suffice it to say, dogs and cats can be trained to pick out galaxies. So, actually, I said that the wrong way. It's something. We actually used to joke when I was back at the Adler Planetarium working on this stuff, the Shed Aquarium, if people from Chicago know, the Shed Aquarium is just up the road. Of course, they have dolphins and the dolphin trainers. And we used to think, what would happen if we put galaxy images in the pool and actually train the dolphins? Never got to that project. All right, so things are looking great for machines, right? Not really? Okay, so can you tell, like, what's that? It's a mop. How did the machine, that's a stupid machine, right? It couldn't figure out that that's a dog and that's a mop. Or that's a bagel and that's a dog. Sorry?
Dogs are cute.
The dogs are cute, the bagels not so much. Yeah, but we could eat the bagels. Saying. Okay, so, of course, humans, we need fewer examples. Again, the tiger, we need fewer examples to learn how to classify an object. But once the computer is trained, they can go very quickly, okay? So, Zooniverse has built all these amazing tools. I ask you, please go to the Zooniverse site, pick a project. You can do it on your mobile phone, waiting at Starbucks, if you would like. We use the combination of machines, which gives a proposal, but we don't really trust those machines. So we still need a human to validate what the machine said. Okay, great. We have these traces that we do. Well, we can train an algorithm to do those traces on the cell nucleus. Again, don't quite trust the machine, but it's better than having 40 people do all that work to trace. Now we get a machine proposal, and we only need 3 to 5 people to validate that machine proposal. So we are accelerating the rate at which we are able to process the big data flood that we're in. So this is our correct a machine strategy. We have human in the loop. And all this is about human in the loop. On Galaxy Zoo, we initiated this some time ago. The algorithm that we developed looks at all the information. In fact, what it did, it modeled all the volunteers. Yeah. And it was like, okay, I'm going to predict what the volunteers are going to say about this new image. And then I'm going to make that my guess. But I still need the real volunteers to validate that. Okay. So we can get really clever, do all sorts of fun things. All right. And just again to say, everybody and their brother and sister are using Galaxy Zoo and Zooniverse data to train machine algorithms for science. All right. So all machines need is just large training sets. So we've learned that, right? Plenty of data out there from us and the training sets from Zooniverse. Is that really true? What's wrong? A hand, well, not just the hand. Just so much stuff wrong. Just wrong. And if any of you guys have experienced this is the hype side of AI, okay? This is the hallucination. This is the stuff when you look at whatever search thing you've done and it pops up an answer with the AI agent or whatever, and you're like, that doesn't seem right. Probably not. Okay, so just be really, really, really careful with all that AI stuff going on out there, because this is an obvious example, but some of the stuff out there is really not as obvious, right? Okay. Right. So what do we, no, I won't get in one of those yet. So this is all part of this basic issue of what we call the Zorilla problem. Anybody know? Do you guys know what a Zorilla is? Tell me you know what a Zorilla is. What's your guess? What? It's an animal. That's true. What? A zoo gorilla. Okay, that's pretty good. It's a skunk. It's a stripy skunk, somewhat reminiscent of a golden gopher, but I mean, not really. It lives in Africa, and yeah, okay. Out of all the snapshot Serengeti images, millions of them, there are 7 photos of a Zorilla. These guys are shy. Well, that's a Zorilla right there. So now you know what a Zorilla looks like. So if you ever come across an animal that looks like that, Zorilla. Okay? All right. Somebody else Kevin Shawinski tries to give this talk. You'll know the answer. Okay. So it's the same kind of problem. This is adversarial attacks. Okay? Machines are different. What else is wrong with this picture? Say. Polar bears do not live in Antarctica. They certainly don't live where the penguins live, unless they're in a zoo. And then you wouldn't want to put the polar bear in the penguin. Yeah, no. All right. And it's not just polar bears. This is literally from a paper that was studying how to make adversarial attacks. So this is an algorithm that normally picks out humans. But, okay, make that your Christmas sweater, right? But, okay. Anyways, the point is, there's the kind of a war, if you will, going on in AI where the good guys try to make the algorithms and the bad guys try to beat the algorithms, okay? And so it's possible to do that. So, question, we need the human to be able to see all that complex imagery in, for example, in that sweater and decide that it's still a human. The machine can't do that. So this all gets to this point that rare objects, so the Zorilla, 7 out of millions, one adversarial attack, like the sweater, humans are really, really, really good at serendipitous discovery. And that, going all the way back to Galaxies Zoo in the beginning, you were here last week. I gather you heard something about the green pea, or you heard the green peas mentioned. So what happened? Well, actually, unfortunately, sorry, you don't get to see Hanny. Hanny discovered the green pea. Hanny is a Dutch school teacher. And she was doing her galaxy classifications, and she came across an image that looked somewhat like this, well, like that. And she posted on our forum, "Give peas a chance." And an entire astronomical industry was born. No joke. So these are the peas, about 20 volunteers, also who found peas. Guess what they became?
Peas in a pod.
The Peas Corps, but peas in a pod is pretty good too. They became the Peas Corps, okay? So they had a blast. They discovered an entirely new class of galaxy. And furthermore, they were trying to get scientists' attention. Took them a long time. It took 6 months. In that period of time, they were looking at all sorts of different literature. They were looking at spectroscopy. They came up with their own ideas about what these things were. Turns out that Galaxy Zoo green peas are very low mass galaxies, very few elements beyond hydrogen and helium. Okay, so no reprocessing, no cycling of that material. Some of the highest star formation rates known. Are these actually local analogs? Because they're actually very nearby to be imaged by the Sloan Digital Sky Survey. Are they actually local analogs to the very first galaxies? In which case, this is a big bonanza, because we get to study stuff nearby that emulates things from the very beginning of time. We don't, so we'll just leave it at that. All right, so this, and I'm sure Claudia Scarlata will say a lot more about this, because this is a lot of her work as well. She and I collaborate on some of the stuff. But anyways, these are some of the papers that were written about Galaxy Zoo green peas in the beginning. Since 2007, 419 papers. Astrophysical researchers seriously using the term green peas. It is literally, you go to any astrophysics conference and you say green pea, and they're like, of course. Yeah, they're really cool. Yeah. Yeah, discovered by volunteers, discovered by a Dutch school teacher, classifying galaxies. So it's not just galaxies, but people find the oddest things. They find cross-species vigilance between meerkats and mongoose. Nobody had ever seen this before, or at least if they had, it hadn't been documented. Okay, so some really cool stuff. Attentive volunteers ask questions. What's this? And the researchers are like, cool. All right, so I'm running out of time. So, point is, humans can make serendipitous discoveries because they're good at asking that question, what's that? That doesn't look like the things I've seen. Machines not so good at that. They don't know how to tell Christmas sweaters from other things. So, what are we doing now? We are putting together ways in which we can get the humans to do their best at making serendipitous discoveries. Remember, we've got 20 billion galaxies, and that's just galaxies. 20 billion galaxies we have to sift through to find the discoveries, to find the new stuff, okay? All right, this happens to be LIGO. You're going to hear about LIGO next week. I'm not going to take up too much time. It's just to say that this is one way we kind of tried to gamify things. So easy stuff at the first levels, harder stuff as you get higher and higher in your skill. And then they find new things. Again, you'll hear more about what glitches are, but these are things that masquerade as gravitational wave detections. And volunteers are helping the people who run the LIGO machinery to eliminate false positives, glitches from the system. All right, so it's impossible for human eyes to inspect every single image. So we need a combination of human and machine anomaly detectors, or rare thing finders. That's what anomaly means, okay? So what we've done is we've made a version of Galaxy Zoo that we call Weird and Wonderful, like the title of the talk. So it's basically, we just ask you, you see anything weird or wonderful in this image? Okay, so we train a machine algorithm. That's what the stupid machine comes up with. Okay, well, these are glitches that we know about. That's what the machine said was anomalies. The humans came up with a lot more interesting things. Okay, but still, these are not scientifically interesting necessarily. So we're after the scientifically rare, unusual things. These emerging galaxies. Well, some of them came up with gravitational arcs, white dwarf candidate, ring galaxies, clumps, asteroids. That's not a galaxy. So several of them did, a better job. So we used all the information put together, and we came up with a way to account for what the human scores are and the machine scores are. And then we can combine those two and find that we only have to look at 20% of the total set of data to be confident that we found all of the interesting things. So you combine the humans and the machines. It's a long story. There's a paper. I can point you to the paper if you're interested. But just to say, this is what we're working on right now, is trying to figure out how to detect the rare stuff in 20 billion images of galaxies. Where are those coming from? As I said, the Vera Rubin telescope. After 30 years of design, testing, and construction, this is the first light image that was released last week. 30 years, and it's here. I've been giving versions of this talk with that picture of it's coming, 20 billion galaxies. We know it's coming, we know it's here. It's here, the floodwaters are rising. Okay, so get ready. Please, we need your help desperately. Please sign up here if you want to help us try to find things that are interesting in the Rubin 20 billion galaxies. And in summary, I'm just going to say that we've been doing a lot of work over the last 17 years. 18, I guess by now. Wow. 18 years in putting together a way that humans and machines can work together reliably to get the best information out of the data sets that form this deluge, this flood of data that we're all drowning under. So this is the core team here at a team meeting. We have about 120 research institutions that we work with worldwide. You can build a project. Easy. You guys can build a project. Yeah, okay, we'll talk. Okay, and so thank you for your attention. And again, thank you to all of our volunteers and of course, our funding partners. Thank you.